Okay, chapter 2.12, solve multi-step problems using equations. Let's just look at the first equation. Chris Murray's computer has 3 memory cards with 64 gigabytes of space each. So she has 3 cards with 64 gigabytes each. Okay, so hopefully you can read that. 3 cards with 64 gigabytes each. And she has 2 memory cards with 16 gigabytes of memory each. So we're going to write each of the important things down here. Okay, and we can switch back and forth. Add that little S there. The files on her computer use 78 gigabytes of space. So her computer has the files use 78 gigabytes of space total. That's kind of a total. And then our question is, how much memory does her computer have left? I'm going to have to write small here. Oh, hopefully I could spell correctly. I missed a couple of letters. Big old question mark, because that's what this is. The question is probably the most important part. So step 1, we want to find out how much total this 64 gigabytes with 3 cards is. So that's our first step. So we could think of this as there's 1, 2, 3 cards, each with 64 on it, 64 gigabytes. That's her memory. So this total is the part we don't know. It's an n. It's the part we don't know. So we know that 3 times 64 is the total, which is an n. When we start using letters to show what we're looking for. Okay, so we have to actually do that multiplication. So 64 times 3 is equal to n. So we're going to just work through this problem. 3 times 4 is 12. Carry that 1 over to the tens place. And 3 times 60 is 180. Plus 110 is 190. We don't have to worry about that. We'll just go 3 times 6 is 18, plus 1 is 19. And it ends up being 192. Okay, so because I'm running out of space, I'm going to remember that number 192, and I'm going to delete this. And this total is 192. Okay, 2 cards with 16 gigabytes, that's our second step. We have to solve that. We want to find out what's the total there. Well, that is, it looks similar. We've got 2 cards instead of 3. And there's 16 gig on each card. And so there's some total that we don't know. That's called n. And to find it out, we have to do 16 times 3. Times 2, because there's only 2 this time. And some of you can probably do that in your head, but it's okay if you can't. We're going to just multiply it out for everybody. 6 times 2 is 12. We carry that tens place over there, that 1. 12, and then 2 times 1 is 2, plus 1 is 3. That's really 2 times 10, which is 20, plus 10 more is 30. And 32 is our answer. And again, we want to remember the 32, because I'm going to get rid of all of the work. Okay, so we have when I start to color coordinate things, I'd like to try to keep it the same. I have 192 gigs with my 3 cards, and I have 32 gigs with my 2 cards. Step 3, find the total memory on the computer. That makes sense. Our files use 78 gigabytes. But I know I have more than 78 gigabytes because I have 192 plus 32. But what is my total? Well, then I have to take 192 and 32, and then I want to add them. I didn't really pick a color for this. So 2 plus 2 is 4. 9 plus 3 is 12. And again, I have to carry to the next place, which is the hundreds place. And then I get 224. And that makes sense. 192 plus 32 equals 224. That's reasonable because 222 is a little more than 192, or 224. All right, so I'm going to write this down over here. 224 total memory on computer. We have to keep track of our numbers, or we become forgetful and we make mistakes and we don't get good answers. Okay, so now we're down to a pretty simple problem. How much money does her computer have left? Well, we know that there is she's used that much, 78 gigs, and she has a total of this much, and so we have to find the difference. So the difference is a subtraction problem, and we have our total. This is our final step, minus what we've used, and that'll give us an answer. Now, let's check this out. To find this total, we added these two. And they like to show you these little blocks diagrams. It's in the book, 192. And you have a little bit smaller section that's 32. And the total is when you put them together. Now for this subtraction problem, it looks a little different. The subtraction problem is we have, it's really this total, how much money does your computer have left? That's the question here. So there's how much you have left, we can call it Y, and then you have the part that you know, which is the part you've used, which is 78 gigs. And so then there's some total number. We know that the total number, it's because we added it up, is 224. That's this over here. And we're looking to solve for Y. And so if we have 224 take away 78, we get Y. And I think that you already knew that you needed to subtract. Pretty sure you had that. But the pictures in the book are there, and they are helpful. However, sometimes they confuse us too. So I'm tempted to not give you any of these pictures, but at the same time, the book is expecting you to understand them, so we have to spend some time talking about it. Back to our general subtraction, 4 take away 8, we can't do that, so we're going to regroup. Change this to 110 instead of 2 10s, and change this to 14 1s. 14 take away 8 is 6, and again, I can't do that, but I can do 11 take away 7. So I had to borrow there too, or regroup. 11 take away 7 is 4, and it leaves 146 gigabytes of space left on the computer. How much money, or how much memory does her computer have left? And that's what would fit right into here where this Y is 146 gigs. And that takes forever to do a multi-step problem. You have to do several multi-step problems to make this work. Now we're going to do the same problem again, but we're going to use another method. Okay, so it's called order of operations. And the other way is we had 3 cards. I'm just going to draw a quick picture. And each of those cards had 64 gig. And I'm obviously changing colors. And then I had 2 memory cards that weren't quite as big. They each had 16. Okay, this is the total memory. For the computer. Okay, but we know that we had 78 memory used, and that looks like something else completely. It's a little bigger than 64. We had 78 that we used. Okay, and then there's a bunch left, and we want to know how much what's left, and then we'll call it n. This is the same thing, but instead of doing a bunch of little problems, we're going to kind of squeeze it together and do one problem. Okay, so what we have first is, I guess I should change color just to standard black. 3 times 64. That's this one plus this one plus this one is multiplication problem. And we're going to add to it 2 16s, which is 2 times 16. And then we're going to subtract the 78 from it. And that should give us n. Okay, so this is like looking at it all at once. I've got 3 times 64, I've got 2 times 16, and then I take away the 78, which should leave me the n. Okay, now what's interesting is you have to remember that order of operations requires that you multiply before you add and subtract. All right, so that means that we're going to do the 3 times 64 and we're going to do the 2 times 16 first. And if you remember from our last problem, three times 64 was 192. And then I'm going to keep my addition sign here. So I just changed 3 times 64 into the answer, which is 192. And now I'm going to change 2 times 16, which is 32, into the answer. And then bring down my subtraction. Minus 78 equals n. Now all I have is an add and subtract problem. 192 plus 32. If I put these two together, I get 224 minus 78. And if I go ahead and do 224 minus 78, I'll get an answer of 146 gigabytes. And that should be the same problem that you'd already worked out. Okay, so you're going to see some problems like this on your assignment too. And if you get some help from me, I'm happy to do it. You just have to remember the rule that you multiply and do division first, and then you add and subtract second. And you always go from left to right. Okay, I think this is a fairly complicated assignment, so but you're up for it, and I'll help you. So take your time and ask lots of questions.